During her lonely night shifts, Dr. Kim rarely spoke to anyone until she saw the X-ray that revealed a cover-up. Her ballistics expertise was about to save an innocent man. Welcome to One Human, One Story. Before we tell this incredible story, have you ever worked a night shift where you discovered something others missed? Write in the comments, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe. Dr. Sarah Kim had been working the night shift at Chicago General Hospital for 8 years. The radiology department on the 3rd floor was her domain from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a quiet realm of glowing monitors, humming machines, and shadows that stretched long across empty corridors. Most people found the isolation unsettling, but Sarah preferred it. The silence gave her space to think, to analyze, to see patterns that others might miss. Sarah was 34 years old, Korean-American, with steady hands and sharper eyes. She had chosen radiology because it combined two things she excelled at: precision and problem-solving. Every X-ray, CT scan, and MRI was a puzzle waiting to be solved, a story told in shades of gray and white, bones that whispered secrets, organs that revealed their conditions, trauma that painted pictures of violence or accident. What her colleagues didn't know was that Sarah had spent 4 years before medical school as a ballistics expert for the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. She had analyzed bullet trajectories, studied wound patterns, identified weapons from the damage they caused. She had testified in military courts about the physics of projectiles, the science of destruction, the mathematical certainty of cause and effect. But that was another life, another version of herself that she had carefully left behind when she decided to become a doctor. The transition from analyzing death to preserving life had been intentional, healing instead of investigating, building instead of dissecting tragedy. Most nights she succeeded in keeping those worlds separate. Tonight would be different. The emergency call came in at 2:47 a.m. Gunshot victim incoming. ETA 3 minutes. Sarah prepared her workstation, clearing the queue of routine scans to make room for trauma imaging. She had processed hundreds of gunshot wounds over the years. Chicago's South Side provided a steady stream of violence that kept the night shift busy. The patient arrived unconscious. Marcus Williams, age 26, single gunshot wound to the chest. The paramedics had stabilized him during transport, but he was critical. The trauma team worked with practiced efficiency while Sarah waited for the imaging orders. X-rays first, then CT scans to map the internal damage. Within minutes, the first images appeared on her monitors. Sarah leaned forward, studying the stark black and white landscape of Marcus Williams's chest cavity. The bullet had entered through the left side, penetrated the lung, and lodged near the heart. Serious, but not immediately fatal if they operated quickly. But something else caught her attention, something that made her pause and look more carefully. The bullet trajectory was wrong. According to the police report, Marcus had been shot during a robbery attempt. He was walking home from his job at a convenience store when 2 men approached him demanding money. When he refused, they shot him and fled. A witness had given a description, and a suspect was already in custody. Jerome Washington, age 19. He had been found 6 blocks away with a .38 caliber revolver and Marcus Williams's wallet. The story was clean, simple, the kind of case that would be processed quickly through the system, except the physics didn't match. Sarah enhanced the image, rotating it to different angles. Her ballistics training kicked in automatically. Trajectory analysis, entry angle, powder burns. The bullet had entered Marcus Williams's chest at a downward angle of approximately 35 degrees. For that to happen, the shooter would have had to be significantly taller than the victim, or shooting from an elevated position. Marcus Williams was 5 feet 11 inches tall, according to his medical records. Jerome Washington was 5 feet 6. Even if Washington had been holding the gun at shoulder height, the trajectory would have been level or slightly upward, not the steep downward angle Sarah was seeing. Sarah cross-referenced the location where Marcus was found, the intersection of 47th and Cottage Grove. Flat terrain, no elevated positions, no hills or stairs or platforms that would explain the bullet's path. Either the police report was wrong, or someone was lying. Sarah printed the images and made detailed measurements. Entry angle 34 degrees downward. Bullet path consistent with a shooter positioned at least 8 feet above the victim. The mathematics were clear and undeniable. She called the trauma surgeon. Dr. Rodriguez was in the middle of removing the bullet, but he took her call. "What do you have for me, Sarah?" The bullet trajectory doesn't match the witness statement. This victim wasn't shot at street level. The angle indicates the shooter was elevated significantly above him. Rodriguez paused. She could hear the beeping of monitors in the background. Are you sure? Positive. I've run the calculations twice. This is a downward trajectory of at least 30 degrees. Either your victim was lying flat on the ground when he was shot, or the shooter was positioned well above street level. Marcus was conscious when the paramedics found him, standing and talking. Witnesses saw him walking just before the shooting. Then the shooter wasn't on the ground with him. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Sarah could hear him discussing something with his surgical team. When he came back on the line, his voice was different, more serious. Sarah, I need you to document everything. Measurements, angles, calculations. If what you're saying is accurate, this case isn't what it appears to be. After the call, Sarah sat back in her chair, staring at the images on her screen. She had stumbled onto something that could change the entire investigation. An innocent man might be sitting in jail while the real shooter remained free. But getting involved meant exposing her background. Questions would be asked about how a radiologist had developed such detailed knowledge of ballistics. Her military service would become part of the record. The quiet life she had built would be disrupted. Sarah made copies of the images and her analysis. She documented the trajectory measurements, created detailed diagrams, and wrote a comprehensive report explaining why the police version of events was physically impossible. Then she locked the files in her personal drive and went back to reading routine scans. But she couldn't stop thinking about Jerome Washington, 19 years old, probably scared, definitely facing decades in prison for a crime that the evidence suggested he couldn't have committed. At 6 a.m., Sarah's shift ended. She gathered her belongings and drove home to her quiet apartment in Lincoln Park. She tried to sleep, but her mind kept returning to the trajectory analysis, to the mathematical certainty that someone was lying, to the moral obligation she felt to speak up. By noon, she had made her decision. Sarah called the Chicago Police Department and asked to speak with the detective handling the Marcus Williams case. Detective Ray Morrison had been investigating violent crimes for 15 years. He sounded tired when he answered her call. Dr. Kim, right? You worked on the gunshot victim from last night? Yes, I've found some inconsistencies in the ballistics evidence that I think you should know about. Morrison paused. What kind of inconsistencies? The bullet trajectory doesn't match your witness statements. According to the imaging, the shot came from an elevated position at least 8 feet above the victim. That's not consistent with a street-level robbery. And you determined this how? Exactly? Sarah took a breath. This was the moment that would change everything. I have experience with ballistics analysis. Military background. I know how to read trajectory patterns. There was a longer pause. Military background. What kind exactly? Army Criminal Investigation Division. Ballistics expert, 4 years before medical school. Morrison's tone shifted immediately. Professional interest replacing casual dismissal. Can you come in? I'd like to see this analysis. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in a conference room at the 2nd District Police Station with Detective Morrison and Assistant State's Attorney Jennifer Walsh. Her laptop was connected to a projector displaying the X-ray images and trajectory calculations. The entry angle is 34 degrees downward, Sarah explained, using a laser pointer to highlight the bullet path. For this to occur, the shooter would need to be positioned significantly above the victim. Given Mr. Williams' height and the angle involved, I estimate the shooter was at least 8 feet higher than street level. Walsh leaned forward, studying the projection. And the location where this occurred? Flat intersection. No elevated positions within the immediate area that would allow for this trajectory. Morrison pulled out the case file. Our witness said she saw the whole thing from her apartment window. 2 men approached Williams, demanded money, shot him when he refused. Where was the witness located? Morrison checked his notes. 3rd floor apartment building across the street. Sarah felt something click into place. Can you show me the exact location? They drove to the intersection of 47th and Cottage Grove. Sarah examined the scene while Morrison pointed out the relevant location. Marcus Williams had been found here beside his car. The suspect, Jerome Washington, had been arrested 6 blocks north. The witness, Mrs. Patterson, lived in the apartment building across the street. Sarah looked up at the building. 3rd floor windows had a clear view of the intersection. More importantly, they were elevated approximately 25 feet above street level. Detective Morrison, Sarah said quietly, I think your witness might be your shooter. The investigation that followed lasted 6 weeks. Sarah's ballistics analysis became the foundation for a complete review of the case. Additional evidence emerged that supported her conclusions. Gunpowder residue tests that had been conducted on Jerome Washington came back negative. The .38 caliber revolver found in his possession had not been fired recently. Most damning security camera footage from a nearby building showed Mrs. Patterson leaving her apartment building at approximately the time of the shooting. When confronted with the evidence, Mrs. Patterson confessed. She had been involved in a drug distribution network that Marcus Williams had refused to join. When he threatened to report their activities to police, she had decided to eliminate him. The robbery story was fabricated to cover the real motive. Jerome Washington had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, with a criminal record that made him an easy target for frame-up. The charges against Jerome Washington were dropped. Mrs. Patterson was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Marcus Williams recovered from his injuries and returned to work. The case made headlines as an example of how new forensic techniques were revolutionizing criminal investigation. But Sarah Kim remained largely anonymous. Her role was described in court documents as expert witness ballistics consultant. She testified once during the trial explaining the trajectory analysis in clinical terms. The media coverage focused on the police work and prosecutorial diligence. Sarah's name appeared only in footnotes, which was exactly how she preferred it. Sarah returned to her night shifts at Chicago General, the quiet hours, the glowing monitors, the puzzles hidden in X-rays and CT scans. But now she carried a different awareness of her responsibility. Medical imaging wasn't just about diagnosing illness. Sometimes it was about discovering truth. 3 months later, another gunshot victim arrived during Sarah's shift. The police report described it as an accidental discharge during a hunting trip. But when Sarah examined the images, she saw powder burn patterns that suggested close-range firing. The bullet trajectory indicated the victim had been shot while lying down, not standing, as the report claimed. Sarah called Detective Morrison. By now, they had developed a working relationship based on mutual respect and Sarah's proven expertise. Morrison arrived at the hospital within an hour to review the evidence. "What do you see this time?" he asked. Sarah pointed to the enhanced images on her monitor. Powder burns indicate contact or near-contact firing, less than 6 inches between weapon and victim. The trajectory shows the victim was prone when shot. This wasn't an accident. Someone executed this man while he was helpless. The investigation that followed revealed a murder disguised as hunting accident. 2 brothers fighting over inheritance. The older brother had killed the younger during what was supposed to be a reconciliation camping trip. Without Sarah's analysis, the case would have been closed as accidental death. Word spread quietly through law enforcement circles. The night shift radiologist at Chicago General who could read crime scenes from X-rays. Police departments throughout the region began consulting with Sarah on difficult cases, always unofficially, always with respect for her desire to remain in the background. Sarah developed protocols for recognizing ballistics evidence in medical imaging. She created training materials for other radiologists. She testified as an expert witness in cases where the physics of trauma told stories that contradicted official reports, but she never sought publicity or recognition. Her work spoke for itself. Dr. Sarah Kim had found a way to serve both of her callings, healing patients in the emergency room, seeking justice for victims of violence, using skills learned in military service to support civilian law enforcement. The night shift had become more than just medical work. It had become a mission. On quiet nights when the trauma bays were empty, and the monitors glowed softly in the darkness, Sarah would reflect on the strange path that had brought her here. From ballistics expert to radiologist, from army investigator to hospital doctor, from analyzing death to preserving life. But she had learned that sometimes those roles weren't separate. Sometimes saving one life meant seeking justice for another. Sometimes healing required truth. And sometimes the most important discoveries happened in the quiet hours when most people slept and shadows held secrets that only trained eyes could see. Sarah Kim never sought recognition for her dual expertise. She never wrote articles about her methods or appeared on television to discuss her cases. She simply continued working her night shifts, reading X-rays, saving lives, and occasionally using her unique background to ensure that justice found its way through the darkness. Some abilities are too valuable to waste. Some knowledge is too important to ignore. Sarah had tried to leave her ballistics training behind when she became a doctor, but life had a way of bringing the past forward when it was needed most. The night shift radiologist who could read crime scenes from medical images became a legend in law enforcement enforcement circles, not because she sought fame, but because she sought truth, not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted justice. So I ask you, have you ever discovered something in your work that others missed? Have you ever used unexpected expertise to solve a problem that seemed impossible? Tell us your story in the comments, because here at One Human, One Story, we believe that everyone has skills that can serve others in ways they never imagined. Sometimes the doctor reading your X-ray has training that goes far beyond medicine. Sometimes the person in the quiet job has the loudest impact. And sometimes the most important discoveries happen when different kinds of expertise collide in unexpected ways. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their background, their training, their unique perspective might be exactly what the world needs. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember that knowledge is never wasted. It's just waiting for the right moment to serve.